Well, a hearty shalom to you from one student to another. We're all laboring under a load of trying to acquire new information, and we're all dealing with COVID-related circumstances. I have you reading through materials in order to deal with me and this subject matter. Similarly, my professors here at Cambridge University have me loaded up with things to study. I'm looking to knock out 1 or 2 lectures today, and then I'll hit the books for hours and hours and hours, slogging through hundreds and hundreds of pages. I think I'm right at about 2,000 pages into this of difficult reading. Haven't seen one picture, not one picture in the textbook. Just reading and reading and reading, and I'm trying to take copious notes. I'm trying to retain everything. And when the instructors speak, it can be way over my head, but I'm leaning in on it to try and raise my head. That's the name of the game. So we're all really involved in the same sort of thing, aren't we? You say, well, wait a minute, Jeffrey, you're doing criminal justice over there. That's a little weird. We're doing ministry. Well, if you look at it as it's all about trying to help people, there's a little common denominator there that wouldn't otherwise be there. I think that, we need to have Christian people in all sectors of culture, not just preaching in churches. Though I do preach in church and I am a minister in that capacity, but I like to be not just a minister in the church, but a minister in the world. And, that works out different ways for different people, but it has me here doing this, much as your journey has you there doing that. So here it is. We intersect at this point in time, and the object of our attention will be the book of Leviticus, something of an overview, and I'll tap into some aspects of it, and we'll be good to go with that. I trust you're keeping up with the readings. You need to do that, of course, and I want it read before class on the designated day. That's important. Hopefully then, this speech, this conversation contributes to things that have already been swashing around in your head a little bit. We're going to go ahead and pray together here at the outset and ask God's blessing, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at the outline of Leviticus and light upon things that I just am minded to do as I go through. So, Lord, we bless you and thank you for this time together and for these good people that are bearing up as they and we in the world find ourselves all amidst the turbulence of trying times. Father, I pray you bless them in the endeavor and help me as I speak clearly. Help me to speak clearly and for them to retain well. In Jesus' name, amen. I am looking at my outline. Leviticus, it's called from a Latin word meaning pertaining to the Levites. So it's not really pertaining to you. And if you read the book, you might think, well, yeah, this really isn't pertaining to me. It really takes you back to another world, to be sure. Sacrifices, priests, blood, it's not the world that we live in. If you're a high church minister, Catholic, Orthodox, Episcopal, then the pastors are called priests, and there's the big altar there, and it's all about the Eucharist, recreating in some sense Jesus' sacrifice. But that's about as far as it goes in church talk. Here, it's a different world entirely. And it's important to be sensitive to the differences between our world and their world. We're retrojecting back in time over 3,000 years when we open up Leviticus. And it's literature that pertains to those who are vested with authorization to superintend a different religious system than what you and I are engaged in. Now, to be sure, there's commonalities that are worthy of exploration. Here, there's conversation about particulars associated with sacrifices, animals, blood, etc., that has something to do with placating God. Sins separate people from God, and in addition to repenting for sins, there is this offering that is tendered on the behalf of the people by a priest. Now, that's their world. If you look at our world, of course, sin separates from God still, and we have a different offering that we have Jesus Christ, who shed his blood for us. And, that said, even the talk, Jesus shed his blood for our sins, it sounds so very Christian. But that statement doesn't mean anything unless one understands at the outset that the Older Testament, that God as revealed in the literature, requires a blood sacrifice for sin. Then once one realizes that, then the statement, well, Jesus died for our sins. He shed his blood for us, and the songs in the church, oh, the blood of Jesus. It takes on a kind of meaning by virtue of its connectivity to the Older Testament. Well, Leviticus spells out issues associated with those who superintend sacrifice and more. If I can get you to gaze at the outline in Leviticus, you'll see that chapter 1, verses 1 through 10:47 are titled Approaching a Holy God. And there's notation in there about offerings, and there are a number of offerings on the front end. And then the consecration of the priest. Con is the Latin prefix for with, so with sacred. That is, there is consecration. There is this sacred kind of setting apart of those who minister in the sanctuary. And I think there's something good about that, by the way, something that's lost in modernity. I mean, there is, when I talk to you, I'm predisposed to say, hey, I'm just like you. Well, maybe I'm trying to be. I'm an old fart. I'll be 65 in November. Maybe I'm just trying to be young and trying to be cool. And I don't act my age. But, there's a sense in which I try and communicate with you in a way that underscores that I'm with you. The notation of being a priest is, however, to be set apart, different. It's done differently. Some religious systems are more prone to accentuate that. The clergy wear distinguishable clerical garb to denote that vocationally they're set apart for the sacred. There's a difference between them and the regular world. Now, to be sure, that's true, hopefully with a guy like me and you. But there's this public setting apart, and there's ceremony in conjunction with that. That is, a community gathers, hands are laid on the high priest and the priests, and they're beckoned to don clerical garb to distinguish that they are set apart for a specific purpose. And there's something really good about that. There's something important in that. And I think that those who are called into the ministry, there's a process for that. Getting involved in a local church, showing a level of commitment, evolving that into licensure for ministry, and then ordination. And I think these markers, licensure, ordination, I think they need to be attended with ceremonies to denote that this person has crossed the threshold, that they're taking on something of a new identity. Well, you see that here on the front end. There's offerings, various kinds of offerings for various kinds of circumstance, which I won't get into here now. And then there's offerings for the priests and setting them apart. So it's worth noting that the children of Israel have made their way from Egypt on the way to Israel, actually, and they are in Sinai when Leviticus is tendered. If you look at the literature, the way it unfolds, the Hebrews are at the base of Sinai. Moses has gone up and come down with the initial commandments, and there's some kind of amplification and unpacking. There's the construction of a tabernacle. And with the construction of the tabernacle, there are individuals that are set apart to superintend what takes place therein. And not only that, the priests are vested with civil authorization as well. We live in a world today, there's a separation between church and state. I'm a little weird because I'm involved in the church and I'm involved in the state. Two vocations. The world of Leviticus is interesting, that there's these priests that don't just tend to the sacred. They are lawyers, judges, medical professionals, if you will. In Leviticus, if someone has a certain sickness, someone comes down with symptoms associated with COVID-19, possibly, they are quarantined, lest they come into the camp and unintentionally infect others. And then if they want to be reinstated in the community, let's say if you contracted COVID-19 and so you went on a hiatus, but before you could come back in, you need to get clearance from a medical doctor. Well, the Levitical priests did that stuff. someone had an infection, leprosy, and the priest would have them removed from the camp. And then if the disease would run its course and they're healed, if they wanted to represent in order to be able to engage in social intercourse with the larger community, the priest was the health inspector that certified the reentrance. If someone had a complaint, a civil complaint, so-and-so killed my cow accidentally or whatever, then they would go to the priest to adjudicate, okay, you owe him for the cow and lost milk that he would have made by milking the cow. It's someone has to deal with life's stuff. And these priests are set apart to attend to all of that. Today, as I've said, there's a separation between church and state. As a minister of the gospel, I only have power to advise a particular course of action. If you were to come to me and say, Saif, I have this problem and this, what do you think? Or if you said, Saif, I did this and that and this and that, I could recommend a course of action, but you're not really beholden to obey it. Most don't, in fact. People do what they want to do. A minister has power to suggest. As an agent of the state, however, as I am, to the point of carrying a gun to be able to exercise options for lethal force if deemed necessary, I have a lot more prerogative. I pull someone over on the side of the road for speeding, I have the option to let him go or write him a citation. Here I am a religious person with power to suggest a course of action in that capacity, but then as a civil servant, I have power to do more. We live in a world today where that's differentiated. When you go into this world, it's collapsed. It's one and the same. These religious authorities are civil authorities. That said, we're recognizing they're set apart for the purpose. In chapter 11, verse 1 through 25, we get into things that, separating the clean from the unclean in 11 through 15. And I'll unpack that for you a little bit, as well as taking a look at what it means to be holy. And I should probably mention, even in the first subheading, approaching a holy God, when you and I think of the word holiness, it means, someone that doesn't drink, smoke, or cuss and goes to church on Sunday. And I'm not wanting to take away anything from that, but holiness in Hebrew, kadosh. There's a saying in the Hebrew Bible, kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The word holy itself, etymologically, comes from a word to be separate. It's the word for a cleaver. Let's say you go to a butcher, you want to get 5 pounds of this, and he gets a cleaver, thump, thump, and cuts the meat, gives you your portion. Thump. That cleaver, that which separates. The word holiness harks to that. And while I'm personally beset by all of the characteristics of what it means to be human, hopefully me and you, we, even if we don't walk around in clerical garb, hopefully we still function internally in a way that evidences a kind of separation from the world to varying degrees. Now, different religious traditions see it differently. If you look at chapters 11 through 15, therein you'll see what I just mentioned a moment ago. Priests, relative to separation, deal with their disease controllers, their physicians in effect. There's issues associated with food, what you eat, and childbirth, etc. Different ways that Hebrews are distinguished. I mean, we all make our children the same way, but there are certain things associated with these, with the act of giving birth, with different things that are spelled out here in the literature. If you look at holiness in chapters 16 through 25, there's food taboos that are noted therein. It's interesting, if you look at the word kosher in Hebrew, people ask me if I keep kosher. There's a certain diet that Hebrews have that others don't have. Certain things that Hebrews, if one is abiding by the terms of the contract here, that they don't eat. And people raise the question, is this not eating these foods? What's the purpose behind that? Why don't Jews eat pork or lobster? Or, why don't they do it? Well, the literature prohibits it here in the Old Testament. The reason for it's rather interesting, however, and that is that if you don't eat the same foods as others around you, you're going to be disinclined to intermarry amongst those around you. You know how when boy meets girl, there's eating rituals associated with that. And if you don't eat their food, you're not going to take it to another level in terms of the relationship. And again, Leviticus is really characterized by holiness, that is to say, we're to be separate from the world in who we are, the way we dress, the way we act. There's a kind of differentiation that's noted. And if you can think of this for a moment, these Hebrews, called Hebrews, they were enculturated in Egypt for centuries. But now they're on their way to their destiny in Canaan. And when they get to the land of Canaan, they're to be a different kind of people in the way they act, in the way they eat, and what they do. Even sacrifice is noted previously. That if you look at Leviticus, therein the priests superintend a sacrificial system. What's absent from the sacrificial system are human beings. I say that smiling. It's a different world. Back in antiquity, people offered people. It's kind of weird. You wanted to really show God you love him? Well, you kill your kid, burn him up in a burn offering. Now, I threatened to kill mine. I say that jokingly, of course, I didn't mean it. But the point is that here there's a system that's devoid of human sacrifice. We offer animals in place of. That's the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, back in Genesis. God said, take him and plunge the dagger in his breast, and just when he's about to do so, no, we'll go with the ram instead. And the point is there's a lesson in that for Abraham, and there's a test, but there's an evidence that religion is different in this ancient world than it, for these Hebrews than for people round about. I want you to look with me, please, in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 44. I think therein the author, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, does a good job of getting to the quintessence of what this is all about. For I am Adonai your God. Adonai is the Hebrew word for Lord. I am the Lord your God. Therefore sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. Again, it gives biblical language to what I've already said in conjunction with all this. That is to say, to be holy, sanctify yourself, set yourself apart. And then he says it again right at the end of verse 45. Therefore you shall be holy, for I am holy. There's a sense in which, as I'd said, we are to be different. I think if you were to look at me, I don't dress different. Well, maybe I do dress different. Maybe, 65 years old, I try and look and dress like I'm 40. 20. That, in fact, I have a classmate here who's older, and he's trying to lecture me in the finer points of being a rich gentleman. I don't think he's doing very well. I don't think I'm going to pass that test. But there's the way people dress here and the way they act, and I don't know. I just don't want to do it. I'm fighting, resisting. I have my own style, if you will. But at the end of the day, I understand that I really am to act a little different. For me being different is less about dress. But here you have sanctify yourselves, set yourself apart, be holy. And I realize, by the way, thinking of this, that that's part of your journey. I can't speak to you as if it's a homogeneous group. You're heterogeneous. That is to say, there's differentiation among you. Different people come to Bible college for different reasons, but one of them is this. It's kind of like the Nazarite who takes a vow in the Older Testament, noted here in the literature, where for a season he sets himself apart to focus on things divine. You have your whole life ahead of you. You're a young person, let's say. I'm not. I try and act like it, but you are. And you're saying, look, I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm going to just do 2 years of Bible college and see where it goes from there. And meet the right kind of people, get the right kind of orientation. Sometimes people come from disorientation. Their life beforehand is so out of kilter. They say, look, what I'm going to do is earmark time just to focus on the Lord. And I'm laughing because this can really be a problem for a guy who has the hots for a girl. Hey, how you doing? He kind of wants to strike it up. But she's like, no. I'm just wanting to cultivate my relationship with Jesus. That's why I'm here. Oh, bummer on that. Guy wants to kind of build a bridge to her, but he runs into the fact that that's just not what she's all about in this season in her life, because she wants to set apart the time and the place and the space to focus on things divine. Well, you're just going to be so cool, however, that you're going to help her to see how she can do both and go on the journey with you. I want you to look at Leviticus chapter 26. I'm going to walk through this a little bit with you, and I'm looking at the next section here, actually, in chapter 26, verses 1 through 46, is a stern warning. The Bible makes clear that there are problems and possibilities associated with the covenant. What do I mean by that? I should probably reverse the order. There's possibilities and problems. That if individuals are compliant with what's noted in the literature, the promise in the literature is that it'll go well with you. By way of contradistinction, if you're non-compliant, then it's going to be different entirely. I want you to look in chapter 26, please, in verse 3, and I want you to look at what in theological language is noted as the conditional nature of the covenant. That is to say, the way God performs in relation to the Israelites is predicated upon how they perform in relationship to God. It's measure for measure. Let's look at the literature and then I'll unpack it a little. If you walk in my statutes, my mitzvahot, my commandments, and carry them out, then I will give you rains in their season. The land will yield its crops, and the trees of the field will yield their fruit. Your threshing will last until grape gathering. The grape gathering will last until sowing time. You will eat your bread to the full and live securely in your land. There's two words I want you to see here at the outset. There's the word if, and there's the word then. He says, if you do so-and-so, then I will do so-and-so. If you do this, then I'll do that. In other words, the way God performs is predicated upon compliance with what he requires. And the positive nature of the exchange is attested through agrarian language. He says in verse 4, if you do this, then, he goes on to say, I will give you rains in their season. The land will yield its crops. The trees of the field will yield their fruit. Now, we're not agrarians today. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, just about everybody was, in America was, rural, farming. Now, you have these urban centers that have grown up, and people make a living on computers, not, pulling corn out of the earth. But when you go back here, they're all farmers, or they will be. And the promise is, look, God says, if you are compliant, then you're going to get the rain, and the land will yield its crops, and the trees will yield their fruit. That's the equivalent of the cash register ringing. My son, one of my sons, Zach, well, both my sons, Jacob, my older son, 32, just scored a brand new job, a good job. 32 years old, making 6 figures plus, doing great. And my other son, Zach, who landed a job in sales, in one day made $4,000. And he was like, wow. He's like 28. He's like, wow, that's what I'm talking about. He says here, look, if you're compliant, then the rain's going to come and your crops are going to produce and your trees are going to bear fruit. It's like, wow, that's the equivalent, as I'd said, of the cash register ringing. Now, there is in the literature this, for lack of a better term, this promise of blessing. It's there. I do think, by the way, that there is a financial component associated with godly living. And I don't mean just because, you prayed the sinner's prayer and go to church on Sunday, that just by virtue of the fact that you're religious, that entitles you to a Rolls Royce and, $300,000 a year. That's a little overly simplistic. But I do think that transformed lives that live right and work right and serve God and serve people, that has a way eventually of monetizing, of translating into betterment on your behalf. It just does. It just leads itself to a kind of prosperity that wouldn't otherwise be there. Let me illustrate. Take someone who's an alcoholic, and let's say there's certain other vices that go along with it. Cigarette smoking. What's cigarettes? $5 a pack. What does it cost for a drink? If you smoke 2 packs a day, and you'd like to hit the bottle, I mean, how much money are you spending in a week just to satisfy the habit? If you walk with the Lord and you and those monies aren't diverted to those vices, there's a kind of real world prosperity that you have that wouldn't otherwise be there just because your energies have been diverted. Similarly, let's say if you're an alcoholic, you're not living right, not only are you spending your money like that, but it probably has a net effect on your relationships. Your wife's not happy with you, your dog growls at you when you come home, but if you turn your life around and you live right, there's a kind of restoration of relationships with others who have been estranged from you because of your poor performance. And that translates into a better way of being. You have more money that's not being diverted into vices. Not only that, if you have a transformed life, let's say, you go to work in the factory and the boss says, "Hey, Jones, there's something different about him these days. You're a better worker, you have a better attitude, you get along with people better." When it comes to promotion time, you might find yourself, rising to the top of the pack. Instead of just being a grumpy old fart on the assembly line, can't wait to get off so he can go get his beers or whatever. Now you're a different kind of human being, and that invariably bubbles up. It translates into a kind of success in life. That's how I see this working, and success comes over time and through circumstance. But there is a blessing associated with walking with the Lord, and the blessing can be quantified financially, and it can be qualified too. That is to say, the quality of your life is more blessed, not just the quantity of the assets that you present with. It's all there. I mean, there is a kind of blessing that translates from walking with the Lord. He says in verse 6, "I will bring shalom or peace in your land, and you will lie down and no one will make you afraid," etc. If you look in verse 9, "I will turn towards you, make you fruitful and multiply you, and confirm my covenant with you." So what I want you to see here, if you look in chapter 26, there's blessings associated with compliance with what the Lord is unfolding. If you look in verse 14, there's a word there that I want to alight upon. Well, first I'll read a couple sentences and then I'll look at the word. He says, "But if you will not listen to me nor carry out these mitzvot or commandments, and if you reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors my ordinances, so that you not keep my mitzvot, my commandments, but instead break my covenant, then I will do the following to you in return. I will appoint terror over you, wasting disease and fever that will dim the eyes and cause the soul to pine away. You will sow your seed in vain, because your enemies will eat it." In other words, you can work hard as you want as a farmer, but you're not going to enjoy the fruit of your labors. Now, the word here that I want to underscore, it's a conjunction. It's the word "but." Remember I said earlier that if you look at the Old Testament economy, it's under what in theological nomenclature is a conditional covenant. That is to say, the way God performs is predicated upon the way people perform. There's a little give and take here. And I should say, by the way, that while I don't understand ourselves to be living under the terms of endearment in the Old Covenant, there's principles in it that carry into the future. Someone goes to a Billy Graham crusade, his girlfriend, how come it, or to hear the evangelist or whatever, and his girlfriend drags him and he goes and walks up front and, asks Jesus Christ into his heart as personal Lord and Savior, and then walks away from it the next day and, hasn't been around a church for 20 years and, "Oh, well, no, he accepted Jesus and he's going to die and go to heaven," I mean, I said the prayer back then, so it's all going to turn out well. Well, listen, I don't want to be the judge and jury of the outcome of people's lives, but sometimes if something sounds too good to be true, there's a good chance that it is. That life is what you put into it. You get what you pay for. And he says here, look, he says there's these blessings that'll accrue to you if you're faithful. But then if you look in verse 14, there's the word but. But if you will not listen, if you will not do this, if you not do that, well then deal's off. But it's not just that the deal is off, whereas God's not going to be a blessing. He becomes, in effect, he's positioned, in effect, here as something of an adversary. He says, I will appoint terror over you, disease, fever, etc. And then he goes on and on. Now, what's interesting here, among other things, is that if you look at what we'll call the curses of disobedience, there's a lot more language in the curses of disobedience than there are words in the blessings for obedience. It's interesting. You get it both ways. God says, listen, here's the deal. Here's what's expected. If you do it right, good for you. If you don't do it right, no more Mr. Nice Guy. You're going to experience something else. That conditional nature of it all is certainly intrinsic to understanding the Older Testament. Now, I don't know, what you think about rewards and punishments. Sometimes different people are motivated by different things. If you ask the question, what prompts people to change? What prompts them to change? People can change because they think, if I make the change, things can get better. And thus I'll make the change because things will get better. Sometimes people will make a change because they discover things will get worse if I don't. Let's say you go to the doctor, you have a liver problem, and the doctor says, look, here's the deal. Your liver's all eaten up. I'm not a medical doctor, I'm just talking. And the doctor says, listen, if you stop drinking and do such and such, then you can go on and do this and that and this and that, and it can be better for you. If you don't do it, then here's what's going to happen. You'll be dead in 6 months. Or let's say someone, with another analogy, someone discovers that if they can change certain aspects of their life, there's possibilities of betterment for their life. Or if they don't change, there's prospects of things getting worse. People can be moved either by the possibilities of good things coming or the fear of bad things coming. And all that's in the balance and is predicated upon a change. That's the way human beings are. Some people get saved because, I just want to follow Jesus. I see such value and such virtue, and yes, it's a better way of living, and I want to do it, and I do it. Okay. Some make a decision because they don't want to go to hell. Some pursue the blessings, some want to avoid the punishment. There's some kind of internal calculus about how we attend to that business. But the point is that's here in the literature. What's spelled out on the front end is the importance of compliance. With that warning attended to, then, you have laws pertaining to various vows and gifts. On the whole, the book of Leviticus strikes me as being very, very, very important. That a little far removed from us, as I'd said a moment ago. By that I mean, or as I'd said, that it's a different world from us. With that said, by the way, in the Jewish world, when Jewish children learned to read, the primer, the textbook for learning to read for children was Leviticus. I remember as a little boy, I went to a yeshiva, which was a religious Jewish school. I used to wear the yarmulke, the little skull cap that Jewish people wear. And, I was in an Orthodox Jewish world. And, half of our subjects were Hebrew, Jewish studies, Jewish religion, the other half, secular studies. And as a little kid, I grew up in that. And I remember, was it first or second grade? I remember the teacher. He was very scary. His name was Mr. DeMont. but he was old and wrinkly. Old. I'm probably older than he is. We called him Mr. DeMonster. And I remember we each were given a copy of the book of Leviticus in Hebrew. And it's the way you learn to read. In fact, you might remember that Paul in the New Testament, talking about the law, he said the law was our schoolmaster. I think it's Galatians. The law is a schoolmaster until Christ comes. So, the schoolmaster. Actually, the Greek for the term is the word for a boy leader. The law leads children. Now, partly that harks to, if you look at, in Jewish culture, it was deemed meritorious for Jewish men to begin the day by taking their children to school. By the hand, it underscores the importance of it. You know, my son Zach, I would drive him to school. Now, the school bus stopped right in front of our house. But by virtue of him getting in the car with me, the boys getting in the car, it telegraphs a certain kind of value that I place on education. You know, it's the father's influence in it. And so the law was like a boy leader. It kind of harks to the father leading the child to go get an education. And in the Jewish world, it's deemed incumbent upon the male of the species to ensure that the children learn the religion and they learn to get a vocation. Those two things are very, very important in the Jewish world. That both of them were to attend to that. And in the Jewish world, by the way, education is so important. You know, my son Jacob, 32 years old, probably has a base salary of $132,000. I call him a failure, a dropout. You know, why do I call him a dropout? Because he only has an MBA, you know, a master's degree in business administration. What a loser. That, what, you don't have a doctorate? You know, it's in the Jewish world, you know, people place such a premium on education. Learning is everything. It's just so important. You can have a Jewish man who, you know, has a factory of 1,000 employees. He makes millions of dollars a year. He can have a daughter that goes off to college and gets a PhD in history or art or literature. In his mind, you know, let's say she gets the job, PhD in art, and gets a job at a community college for $50,000 a year. He makes millions. In his mind, he will think that his daughter has surpassed him. You know, education is everything. You know, it's just part of the culture. You know, my wife has an MBA degree and a PhD. She comes from a Jewish culture. I have 2 doctorates, and here I am at 65 almost, laboring in a graduate degree at Cambridge University. It's a way of life. We just keep growing, growing, growing. For Jews, I'm talking too much about all that. For Jewish people, you know, traditionally Leviticus was the primer. It was the book we learned to read. I remember as a little kid, too, learning English. You have these simple little children's books. Jack and Jill went up the hill. You learn basic reading. Leviticus was basic reading for Jews, to cut their teeth on the literature, and with that to cultivate an understanding, not just of how to read and how to write, but to appreciate the fact that we're different. We are. And it doesn't hurt us. It doesn't hurt you, to my way of thinking, to similarly cultivate an appreciation for that. Well, with all that said, I could keep talking, but I can finish up a little early here just by harking back to the one verse that I wanted you to recall in Leviticus chapter 11. I am Adonai, your God. I am the Lord your God. Therefore, sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. Reminds me of early Genesis, you know. And God said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. You know, this is the Latin expression, imago Dei, the image of God, that we are to, if you take the word Christian itself, you know, the word Christian means Christ-like. As he is in the world, as he was in the world, as revealed in the literature, so we are to be in the world. You know, I like to say in my own words, you know, there's lots of problems in this world. I want to be part of the cure. That's the way I put it. I went into ministry. I want to help people. I do. My job here is to help acquaint you with the literature. To help acquaint you with the literature. It's on your own to get it. If you read the Bible, if you read the textbook, if you focus with me on the journey here instead of just eating potato chips and drinking Coke, and just giving a casual, okay, I got to listen to the fool, but if you really kind of lean in on it, I think education is more about the student than it is the teacher. That's why I think the old Buddhist expression is correct, that when the student is ready, the teacher will emerge. Learning and growing has more to do with you than me. You kind of got to be into it to want to do it. But this giving yourself over to the task to learn God's word, his will, and his ways in order to be better in the world, I think that's important because we want to follow. He says, I am the Lord your God, therefore sanctify yourselves and be holy, be separate, for I am holy. That is to say, we're to imitate him. Inasmuch as this is the way he was in the world, so it's the way we want to be. We want to imitate. And I think, by the way, that, for what it means to walk with the Lord, for some people, you're the only Bible they're going to read, or they're going to start by reading you. They're going to, imitate you, your example. God says, much as I am holy, I want you to be holy. I want you to follow my example, to live it out. There's a church around the corner from where I live, Vertical Church, where the saying there is, lift him up and live him out. It's to go out there in the world and be in the world and to imitate him. And I think that's important. Well, anyways, we're all done here. Let's do this again. We'll get to Numbers. Thanks for going with me on the journey. Ciao.